welcome to the Soccer Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Mowbray, and in each episode I will discuss the key topics that impact on football coaching from the foundation and youth development phases. Thanks for listening, I hope you enjoy this episode. Hey Grant, how are you doing?
Doing well, thanks for having me.
Well, 100% all my pleasure. Before we get into the serious stuff around all the football side of things, just how are you and how's things out in the US? Obviously, it's different times in different areas, but how are things there?
Yeah, I think things are different, hopefully on a more positive note with the vaccine on its way. I think most clubs across the country have been open to continue to train and play in some shape or form. So we've had a return to a bit of normalcy. But again, all that has been changed for sure since COVID. But all in all, I think there's a bit of optimism going into 2021, and we're managing. So optimistic, hopeful, looking forward to 2021 and getting out of 2020.
Where are you in the US?
Yeah, I'm down near Dayton or Cincinnati area in Ohio in the Midwest.
And what's that like then for soccer out there? Is that a hotbed for soccer?
Yeah, I think definitely have some good colleges. I mean, Akron has traditionally been a top soccer university here. So definitely bring in good coaches, good soccer players. In the MLS run of things, the Columbus Crew, our local professional club in our backyard, just won the MLS Cup. So we definitely have high standards, whether it be university, but definitely I think it's different than Texas or Florida or California, where you can play year round. Definitely the winter season, it can be brutal here. Snow can be here starting from October, November, all the way to May sometimes, or end of April. And so it makes things interesting, making sure that you're battling for your facilities and playing space. And sometimes you're reduced to a quarter of a field, which we all know is not ideal, but sometimes just comes with a job. So trying to make the most of that. But definitely, I think we have a good level of coaches. The clubs want to do it the right way. We have a bit of academies here, and definitely, like us all, trying to raise the standard wherever we are.
I know we kind of got in contact really through your book, which we're going to cover in a fair bit of detail, I hope, in the next half an hour, 45 minutes or so. And that is excellent, the book. But Grant, people out there may not have come across you or know what you do and stuff. So if you don't mind, and in true kind of podcast, soccer coaching kind of style, just a bit about your background, your journey up to what you've done previously and what you currently do, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I think like many of us getting into coaching, we've had some experience with the game at some level. For me, grew up playing the game. It wasn't very popular at my time. Didn't have YouTube. Didn't have all these apps to get out there as the youth do at this time. But we did have exchange students growing up. So we had an exchange student from Germany and from Italy. And being a young boy, followed them around, and they introduced me to the game of soccer, and I just loved it. It was a fantastic introduction, I would say. And then grew up playing, had the opportunity to continue in college. And then after college, I had the opportunity to play overseas at the lower professional levels in Austria, some trials in Germany and Brazil. In Austria, playing there, I met my wife and we settled down in Austria. And then shortly after getting married, we returned here to the States for a coaching job. And I've kind of just been in coaching ever since. I've always loved to learn about the game as a player, and definitely have tried to learn the craft as best as I can and learn as much as I can through conversations like this or coaching courses. But it's been an incredible journey in the coaching world to rub shoulders with some of the best and to learn what I have over the years. And I do understand there's so much more to learn. So that's a quick run of things. But definitely the game has been great to me, and I want to give it back in every positive way I can to the kids and players I rub shoulders with.
And currently now, so what's your kind of week look like now for you at the moment?
On holidays, so I work for a university. I'm the first assistant at a Division II school here on the men's side. A very good program, very proud of what we've done and been able to accomplish. And then also at a club in the area here in Dayton called Cusa Soccer Club. So we have about maybe 500, 600 kids. With COVID, that has changed a little bit, but I'm the director of methodology, and I have a couple teams in the high school age groups. And so from the youth, working with youth coaches to high performance in college, I have an opportunity and a talent pool to really work and exercise and learn from in experiential ways. Some of these things that I've kind of brought out in the book.
Maybe I'll ask you afterwards, but no, let me ask you first. Actually, what age group do you like coaching? Do you have a preference over a particular kind of age group, or do you don't mind?
I think it depends on your environment. I think it's really hard because, and maybe at the higher performance level, so for college, you have a lot of control. You can recruit those players. You can control more or less their day to day, and it makes training very easy. Where you know what players you're going to have. You have a physio on staff. You know what you can and can't do. When we'll have training, travel times. So that really allows for a very deep dive into training and development. Sometimes at the youth level, there's a lot of things you have to juggle: transportation, school conflicts, commitment issues. And so when you're trying to build the ideal learning and training environment, I think the youth present a lot of challenges because you just don't have that control or buy-in necessarily as you have at the older age groups. But again, that depends on the club and the academy and the players. So each team, they might have an incredible buy-in in the culture, and the coach might have an incredible. They might be very open and receptive to everything that's going on. So I think it varies where you are, but
Yeah.
I think if I had to choose, the high performance right now.
Nothing wrong with that at all. Yeah, I just think it's funny you speak to coaches, and some have a real leniency towards a certain age group or a certain level, and you've got to go where your passion drives you, where you think your skill set best matches, right? And if you feel confident in that space. But it's a good point you make about actually it's more the environment that matters, right? If that's a good fit for you, then that's the right place to be. How would you describe your coaching and your kind of coaching philosophy and principles? What's important to you? And if we were to come and watch one of your sessions, Grant, what would it look like? What would we get a feel for?
Yeah, so I think again it will depend on the context that you're in. How you work with 23-year-olds it will be different than you work with your U8s. But really, I try to, in every session, I want to be professional. I want to be prepared. I want to make sure that it is a learning environment where it's engaging for the players, whatever level they may be. That there's a reciprocation of relationship between the coach and the player. I like this idea that the player, and in many ways, is the curriculum, that we cannot necessarily impose all our ideas. While we might have a game idea, a game model, we might have an ideal that we strive for, but you can't do that alone. You can't drive the players to just manufacture those behaviors in a mechanistic way. That you want to work along with your players in a mutually enriching way. So I try to make it as fun and as competitive and as engaging as I can, and very professional. But that professional, like you said, uh, there'll be degrees of it. So it might be more fluid and fun, making sure there's a safe place for the youth to come in. You don't know where they've been, what their family life has been like, but you want to create a better environment for them, whatever that might mean at the moment. And then maybe it's at the higher level. These are young men about to graduate college into the real world. So you want to make sure that they're learning to be responsible leaders on and off the field. And so the standards and expectations that you present in each of those sessions will be nuanced and unique, I think.
Do you have any core values as such, or is it just a general, kind of culture you create? Just it's almost it's less tangible than that. Or do you have actually core values that you spell out to yourself?
Yeah, so I would say, if I could sum up real quickly, excellence. I want to make sure that my players feel like they're getting the very best out of me. I don't like, if I'm asking the very best out of them each and every day, they got to know that I'm doing the very best I can. And then I think relationally, or relationships for sure. Ultimately, it's a enterprise of relationships. You can have all the best answers and be a tactician and be an expert in so many different ways. But if your players don't know that you care for them, that you have their back, that you'll fight for them, and that there's that respect and love and understanding, I think it's very hard to get the best out of them. So I definitely want to have a relational component in my coaching. And then I would say passion. I think what we do should matter. I don't want to go through life in a fog or by accident. I want to be purposeful in what I do. And so I would say this exercise matters because of this, or we're training in this way, and there's a why behind it. And there's a lot of passion behind that why, because it's been processed, digested, tweaked, and molded in the fires, in the furnace of experience, of research, and trying to be the best that you can be. So I would say those three real quickly would sum up. If you were to come to a session, you would feel those things.
I had written down passion before you said it because I could feel it from what I think what was coming. But they're great values to have: excellence, relationships, passion. Can't argue with that. Now, Grant, I could be wrong, but you strike me as someone. You said about being professional, about being prepared, about the environment. You strike me as someone who's quite self-reflective. Is that part of? Would you say you as a coach? Are you constantly looking at you? I get the feeling that if I was in your team and something wasn't right, you'd be looking at yourself before you looked at me as one of your players. Have I got that right with you? That's what it feels like.
Yeah, I think that's been an underutilized tool in coaching, generally speaking. And then for myself, I would say in the beginning areas of my coaching career, is not to be reflective enough. Was this training session positive? Was it successful? And how you define success? What does that even mean? You got to define that. How were things in my delivery? And so using lots of tools of videoing, I have video of myself in my coaching sessions. How are my interventions? How is my positioning? Where am I on the field? So definitely it's not about the coach in the training. I would say not at all. It's about the players and their experience. But a big piece of that is the coach being utilized in a way to provide and to build the best environment for them. And to do so, I think the coach does have to be reflective in their coaching points, in their delivery, in their training design, in their session execution, post training, going into training, being very reflective of where we are as a team. Where are you as a coach? Where are your players? And I think that gives you new eyes to have insights and revelations into some better decision making within the session and overall within the planning and within the experience of the season overall.
The book you've written, which we'll come on to next, could be confused with being something that's very organized and very methodical. And there's elements there that are, but there's lots that aren't as well within it. I wondered, before we look at the book, how much of your coaching practices involve or include some kind of chaos? Because you can orchestrate a game only so much. The match is always going to be a bit chaotic and lots of unknowns. How much do you have chaos in your practices, and how, if you do have them in there, how do you put them in there?
Yeah, so I think being reflective in your coaching methodology or approach to training and your whatever approach in development you take, there's various schools of thought in how do we best develop kids or athletes or your players or a team as a whole. One of the things that I find it very important is we have to start with a game. The game is this open system, this chaotic game of infinite variables and opportunities and actions that we have to equip the players to engage in. So it can be overwhelming, it can be very complex, but the coach, through training design, session design, exercise design, you're able then to dial up or down certain complexities to where it can be maybe a bit more organized, but still keeping the essence of the chaotic system that represents the game. So when we're talking about decision making or skill acquisition, there's components of that to where it is in the context of the chaos. And I think chaos is essential for the learning, but again, if it's dialed up too high, it might be overwhelming. If it's dialed too low, it might be too underwhelming, and the delivery or the learning may be influenced to some degree, better or worse, as a result of that. So we need to be in tune and have a pulse of how much chaos do I really want. And sometimes it might just here's the game, here's the ball, go have fun and play, and let the game itself be as chaotic as it is internally. Or you might add some constraints as a result to dial it down or to promote certain principles, or you might allow certain things or disallow certain things for certain behaviors and adaptations to occur.
It is those dials, isn't it? And I guess one of the crafts to coaching, whatever sport you may be coaching, is about knowing to dial up and dial down, and not just, as for a collective, but for the individuals. And back to your earlier point about actually the player being the curriculum, and actually being able to then fine tune a session that works for everybody that you've got under your wing at that time, if you like, so you can impact most fully on everybody. But it's not always easy to do, is it?
No, I would say that is some of the artwork and the experience of coaching. Is you might come to the pitch with a tight clean cut, perfect in your mind written exercise that's fitting for that day, for those players, for whatever circumstances you're in, but rarely does it ever start or end the way that you plan. And so I think that's why we need to be intentional with your presence in the session, because you have a role to engage in the presence indirectly or directly, but to understand, is my intervention indirectly or indirectly or directly helpful to this player and team and to this moment. For me, one of my assumptions and values in the training is I believe that the feedback should come from the exercise itself, foremost and primarily for the players, rather than the feedback from the coach always or directly, but to allow the players to experience and engage with those exercises in the context that they're finding themselves in. And then you are helping them to better process, sometimes through question, sometimes directly, maybe, sometimes it's a change of a constraint or a rule, or you are taking something away or adding something as you're trying to figure out those dials to give time to experience the behaviors and decision-making moments for those players to engage in that environment, or hopefully for better adaptation and development.
I love that, Grant. The feedback should come from the practice itself. That's brilliant. Yeah, totally right. 100%. Okay, so look, let's get on to the book if that's okay. I had a copy, absolutely couldn't wait for it to come out, read it back to back, made loads of notes while I was reading it. Genuinely, I think it's brilliant. I think part of that was because it came at the right time for me in my coaching. Another part is the fact I think that maybe I did look around, but I couldn't find anything else that put all this information in one place together. So for me, it just works really well. It's written in a way that I can understand it. So you've done really well there, because you don't want to have it too challenging intellectually. You want to be able to get through it nice and relate to it. So that was great. So look, if you don't mind, right, could you just tell us a bit about the book, how it came about, and what's included in it? And then we'll break down some more detail after that.
My partner, Patty King, who co-authored the book along with me, we would always be having conversations about positional play and its application, execution within training, and then within a club as a whole, and specifically in regards to rondos. And as we've reflected and been a part of coaching courses, conventions, and just been around for a while in discussion about this type of methodology and interpretation of the game, we always felt that it was underwhelming, as you said, the research or it wasn't ever robust or comprehensive in dialoguing about rondos. For us, it's always been more or less about, it's technical, it's about to develop technique, passing and receiving, to maintain or improve possession. And that's all well and good and part of the overall conversation, absolutely. But I felt that wasn't delivering the depth of which it came from. And so as we're talking about if we're going to write a book, what would we write a book, is we're both kind of analytical and heavy on the coach education side, and we really want to add to the dialogue. Hopefully it's been adding to the dialogue and not taken away or distracting in any way, but to discuss, okay, what are rondos? What was their context in which they kind of emerged? And as we did that, we wanted to kind of maybe add a bit of an alternative understanding, or maybe a more robust understanding of, it goes much deeper than passing and receiving, technical execution, possession-oriented soccer, that there's this language that it is helpful to unpack, to train, and to learn, that is freeing and very exciting for the player once they begin to kind of dive into those concepts in that language.
There really is a language, isn't it? And I had no idea. I've spent the last maybe 6 to 12 months really trying to understand Rondo's positional play a lot more, to help with my overall game model for younger players, but I think it has relevance. In fact, I know it does. But I had really underestimated the language, and it wasn't until I got your book and started reading through it that it really was a whole new vocabulary. But a language that makes sense. And actually, when you use the language you put in the book, it really does help you understand the processes and what's involved. Is that a language that's just out there, or are these terminologies that you put together, you and Paddy?
Yeah, so I would say probably a both and that was one of the things that we felt we wanted to add to the conversation as you do a deeper dive into positional play, depending on the coaches, depending on the environment, there can be anywhere from a handful of concepts to 30 or 40 or 50 plus concepts. And it's just very difficult to grab hold of it. It was kind of slippery for us in our own development. For me personally, for sure, it was, okay, I hear that concept, I know that concept, but how can that be applied, and what does that mean, and how is that connected to these other concepts? And so as I was reflecting and trying to digest and put together something that was palatable and helpful for my coaching, we kind of came to this place of look, pass, control, move, and this framework that kind of consolidates many of these concepts into a working framework that establishes the relationships within certain spaces, that hopefully gives a lens for the player as they identify the situations that they're in. You can begin to unpack the roles and responsibilities within those spaces to identify where we are in the conversation, to which concepts can be utilized and actualized, depending on what spaces and what relationships you have to those spaces and to the player on or off the ball, and the situation that is occurring. And so for us, it was this process to consolidate and connect all these ideas in a way that for us we found helpful.
Well, you did a cracking job of putting it together, honestly. You get that sense of it, but not like in a mismatch way, in a really coherent way. That I think you could step into this maybe at any point in your coaching journey and get a real understanding of it. Even for those that are probably more practiced in those particular arts than I am, I think it would still really help, because it really just puts it all together. But also what it doesn't do is tell you how to do it. It tells you how it can be done, and then you can interpret that into, I guess, your own circumstances, whatever age group and level that you've got. Was that a conscious thing you did it as part of that, putting that book together?
So going back to how the game is open and chaotic, but even within the chaos, there are, because of the internal logic of the game, there are these repeating patterns that can show up. There's offense, defense, there's certain areas of the ball that you want to try to move from your goal to the opponent's goal. And then there's certain situations that are reoccurring, more or less, that as you become aware of these repeating patterns out of the chaos, you can then hopefully de-randomize the chaos and give a bit more organization that these concepts within positional play can do. It provides us certain parameters and structures that we can then appropriately exist or move together collectively within the certain spaces that you are in the field in relationship to the ball carrier. But so for us, that is a solid chunk that we need to grasp and grapple with. But the how, that will be dependent on the player or the team and the coach and that game model. So if you want to emphasize certain concepts more or less than others in certain situations that are reoccurring, feel free to. You might want to play certain passes in front of the first line of pressure in certain situations, or the buildup of the game, or you want to be more penetrative, or you want to be a bit slower than fast. There's opportunity for that. So that will come down to the interpretation and the idea of the coach and how that is being worked out with the players. But these concepts, we're saying, yes, depending on where you are on the field and the spaces that you find yourself, these are concepts that should be considered, that can be helpful in solving these problems to these situations that are reoccurring, that we refer to as fractals.
So this is going to be the hardest question I'll ask you, I reckon. Can you briefly, in a sentence or two, maybe you could, or more if you need it, could you summarize, in your opinion or your view, what a rondo is, and then what positional play is?
Yeah. So we try to give it a go within the book, and for many, rondos I think we referenced it as well. It's an exercise that has players on the outside of a certain space, and that gives a certain external structure. Then when you have an added player inside, that will change the dynamic for sure. And some of those are positional play games that are going to reinforce certain concepts. For us, big picture is positional play in two words is space management. We believe that if you can manage the spaces through the ball is the tool, pass is the method, the objective and the aims are management of space. That will be more or less kind of a succinct understanding or statement of what we would consider positional play. But then within that, a rondo would be a space shared between players that would unpack certain concepts within that space that we refer to as universal concepts or universal fundamentals that are important to sustain possession or move possession within the space that we have called the game center. So the Rondo exercises are didactical teaching strategies to reinforce and to learn concepts within that certain space and the dynamics that occur within that space in and around the ball.
Well done. Not easy, is it, to summarize it?
Okay, I'll take my glass of water right now. And
you did it brilliantly. But I think that's one of the problems sometimes, is trying to maybe articulate in a simple way what rondos and positional play are. I don't think it's as easy to do. Yeah, I mean, you did it very eloquently there, but it's not as easy to do. And I think one of the dangers I see over in the UK when I see this, it gets misunderstood. Rondos certainly get misunderstood, and I think, if I'm honest with you, misused a little bit, or at least not used to their full depth. I think is what you said earlier, which is the right word for it. And actually, when you really understand what rondos are about and what they can bring to the equation, especially in regards to positional play, they're a wonderful tool to have and utilize. And obviously, we'll come on to that now, I think, in more detail. But I think sometimes it's just trying to explain that in a way that's articulate. I think a lot of coaches almost get lost before they've even started because they don't really understand it. But you did a very good job there in explaining it, so well done.
Thank you. And then I think to that point, we try to bring that out through that short story that was made up about Pep joining your staff and talking about, I'm sorry, I can't work here because I don't understand the language. We speak two different languages. And, going to your point about, you had a make-believe club and coaches just talking about rondos, but at the superficial level, and you have Pep joining your staff and he's saying, yeah, we're not speaking the same language. It's not going to work out. And so absolutely, we would agree with you 100% on that.
But it's funny how language keeps coming up, doesn't it, as a theme through this, not just in the book 100% and the terminology that you use throughout the book, but also in the middle about some of the passing and how that's the language in itself as well, which was a real light bulb moment for me when I was reading the book, but we'll come on to that in a second. Now, we couldn't anyway do the book justice in going through it page by page in a podcast episode. You have to read the book to really get a grasp and understand just how valuable it is. But if it's okay with you, I'd like just to cover maybe 3 or 4 things that I took out of it. Actually, and I could have picked from probably any page on the book, but these kind of things related to me around that concept of language and passing. So if I cover 2 or 3, are you happy just to explain a bit more about,
Absolutely,
what's in there? Yeah. Okay. So there were loads in there, but one of the first things that it seems obvious when you read it, but I think as coaches, well, certainly I never probably really valued this as a relevant point, but when you think about it, it should influence kind of your approach to coaching and everything else. But in the book, you say the ball is only 25% of the relevant information when making a decision. It seems to make perfect sense now you've said it. You put it in the book and I've said it out loud. But if you don't mind, what does that mean, and how should that impact on us as coaches?
If we're approaching the game, and again, I want to assume all coaches have the same ends in mind or the objectives of what a developed player looks like. And so we come from the cloth of intelligent, cognitive, game understanding type players where there's decision making in the action, and that those aren't going to necessarily be divorced, and if so, for limited time or for limited situations. That the quote I think we wrote in the book with Johan about talking that most of the game is played off the ball. And so there's so many things that are occurring that the player has to be aware of, not just only actions and decisions on the ball, but the quality of what is done off the ball will greatly enhance and help your action and executions on the ball. And so when we take the bigger picture, there's constant references that will be informing the decision making of the player on or off the ball. And that being, of course, the ball is one of the main references, teammates off the ball, you have the opponent, and you, of course, have space. And so when we start understanding the relationship between these references, now, again, depending on the level of player and their understanding and maturity of their development, the references are going to take on different meanings. So maybe at the younger ages, it is, where can your first touch take you that you can secure possession and not lose the ball to this oncoming defender? Something as basic as that. Versus maybe as you get older and mature, how can your first touch break a line of pressure? Or if you're off the ball, where's your passing lanes to the ball carrier? how is the spaces, depending on what areas you're occupying, if you're an attacking mid or a winger or a striker, between lines, how are the center backs positioned for you to run through? Are you running in front of the center back or behind the center back, and why? So those references will be contextualized within the developmental journey of the player for sure. But just as a general basic collective, those 4 references are going to be significantly influential in the decision making of the player on and off the ball, either offensively or defensively. We need to be constantly aware of how these references are framing and shaping the landscape of the decision-making opportunities that hopefully will then impose the intentionalities of the player, the team, and the game model for controlling the match.
I coach predominantly younger players, foundation phase, so very much in the start of their journeys. And that what that line meant to me was, you often see when they're first starting out, young players inevitably, the ball is 100% of their attention, isn't it? That's all they're focused on. And I think as coaches, the quicker we can move that attention to where it should be, like I say, maybe around 25%, then the better players they become, because they have that ability now to see the more of what's going on about their own position, the opposition, teammates, the ball, the goal, everything. And although it seems obvious when you read it aloud, I think you almost don't realize that's what you're trying to coach, especially with younger players. You're trying to move them to that increased awareness. And I think even highlighting that to players would be useful, because actually there's so much more going on. And I never did that as a foundation phase coach. I never kind of said aloud, actually, guys, think about the other stuff. We did it in the games, but I didn't shine a light on it as much. So this isn't the most important thing on here. It's one of the most important things, the ball, but it's not the be all and end all. And I often hear coaches saying, oh, how do I get my under 8s to not all swarm around the ball? Well, that's part of the problem, isn't it? Right? That's because all their eyes are on that. So we've got to find clever ways to make them realize about those other elements. And do you think, well, I know the answer to this, but positional play and rondos then are one way of helping that process and helping you become more aware of those other aspects?
I would say so. And I think depending on how you execute the rondos, whether you have them inside the grid or outside the cones, if you have certain zones, so the other day I was working with some U8s. And so, of course, I've never worked with this team. I was doing some coaching education within our club, and I rolled out a ball and just want to see where they're at. Today, we're going to be working on positive receiving, opening up to space, head up, scanning, and trying to take your touch into the space away from pressure. So some receiving ideas and content and concepts, and then some passing as well, but try to keep it within the chaos of the game. And of course, it was hurting cats. It was just all chaos and crazy. But then as we started to engage with the players and said, okay, I made it into a fun game. Hey, these are pirates. This is your treasure. You don't want the pirates to get your treasure. I let the 2 defenders have a bid or a penny to hold between the two to delay their pressure, so that wasn't going to be too fast. And so we just slowly started to scale the difficulty and certain constraints. And it was fantastic as we worked with the group. By the end of it, they were positive. Then we ended with a bit of a positional game, trying to find targets north to south, make it a bit more directional and increase the context. But it was fantastic. I have this clip where you have chaos and herding of cats to an understanding, and you didn't prescribe necessarily those answers. Say, hey, did you lose your treasure? Yeah. What could you have done differently? Where did you receive it? Which foot did you receive it? Where are your teammates? And just dialoguing, keeping it fun, keeping it light. These aren't professionals. They want to keep the treasure. They don't want to lose it to the pirates. It was fun, jovial. But by the end of the hour session, these guys could possess and move the ball intentionally away from the pirates and into the areas of spaces where they had more time and advantage.
What a great way of using a game-based technique and concepts that are age relevant to kind of teach the topics without having to kind of get into the language and detail of the topics themselves. And the funny thing about football is it's a brilliant game. But actually, it's a better game the better it's played, right? Even for kids, they don't all want to bounce around the board because it's just too busy there. They when the game becomes more proper and more open, they enjoy it more. So if you can find clever ways to create that, suddenly you don't need those concepts like pirate stuff and treasure, because actually the game itself is more fun anyway, because they're playing football kind of how it should be, I guess, in inverted commas. But you know, it's having those techniques to get them there, which is an art. The other thing I'd like to ask then is about this thing of the concept of future space, anticipate to dominate. Could you explain a bit about that as well, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I think that's, for me, is a really exciting idea. And if we're thinking about, if we really want to control the match, again, within all the chaos and the unpredictability of it, if we can increase our probability in controlling of the match, what would that look like? And so often soccer is played in the moment, in the now, but the truly dominant teams, dominant players are able to look in the future and link this action to the next action, and it's influential. There is a relationship to, I know my why in this now that's going to create the advantage in the next. And so if you can control the future and you can manipulate the opponent in the spaces that you want them, and you can create the structure and opportunities and advantages that you want consistently without any hiccups, and it's not reactive but proactive by setting up the structure, creating the situations and positive conditions that allow for the advancement of the ball, continuing to build the advantages that you're generating, that's dominant. That for me is really exciting. So I think so often our coaching is in the present, and we're not able to see how we can influence the more positive future conditions that's going to allow us to really penetrate, really develop, really leave our stamp and mark on the game, rather than being reactive and trying to make up and playing in the past or in the present, versus being dominant in the future.
And go on, that whole concept of anticipation, 100%, it's critical to kind of becoming a really advanced player, right? And you see the players that have got it, even at a young age, it's, you know, that they can anticipate and see what's going to happen. How much of that is game intelligence and how much of that is just instinct? Like, is it something we can coach more around the anticipation and game intelligence?
We can provide opportunities for understanding the reality of it, through video feedback, game analysis, to say what are the conditions here? We wanted to advance the game from our build up into the middle third or the final third, or to break that line. What were the conditions that we needed to allow for that? And where did we break down? So as we start building the proper structures and conditions to allow us to continue or to advance the game through our trainings and games and our video analysis, I think they're able to see, this does lead to that. There is purpose behind doing this well in the details that allow for future positive conditions to generate next action advantages. So I think definitely there's there that we can show and present to our players. But definitely, I don't think you should never say that can't be intuitive, or players can't bring that to themselves. And I don't know if they'll be able to vocalize that or put a name to that or identify it themselves. But I think that's part of the creative player that we all want. And I think there's that, again, that relationship that we want to work it out together as coach and player. You don't want to just say, this is my mold, come and fit in it. But we also want to coach the players positively and say, was that the best decision? What other actions could have been done? And how do we positively move forward in that? And what do you want to bring that you really enjoy, that maybe we can find a happy medium to get there together?
One of the many parts of the book that stuck in me and got me thinking, literally one night was in my head the whole night, and it just suddenly the penny dropped. But I'm an Arsenal fan, so I don't know if you know, we have our own challenges at the moment.
I am sorry.
I shouldn't say it out, I know, but it resonates to this point. You talk about how the way a team passes is its language, you know, and I thought, oh, that is so true. Coached a young team, under nines now, and if you watch how they play, because I think there's some good things with them, they speak the same language, the players. Not that they're under nine, so don't get me wrong, you know, they are what they are, but for their age, they speak the same language, and you can tell by the way they share the ball, they're on the same page. And if you compare it to Arsenal, who completely just it seems like every player's got their own language. You can see the disjoint in the way they try and share the ball and move the ball. It just, that particular line or that paragraph in the book just made me look at teams differently, whether that be an under 9 foundation phase grassroots team or a Premier League team that's struggling. You can see how it has relevance. Could you tell us a bit about that? And I'm doing no justice at all, but what do we mean by that, and where does it play out in practice?
Yeah, so that for us is a very fundamental idea and concept. Within positional play, one of the advantages that the team and the coach are trying to generate is this socio-affective superiority. This relationship between players that is often shared between and with the ball. And as I understand those relationships that I share with my teammates on the pitch, in whatever structure, the situation, the formation, the spaces that are being occupied, and the pressure that's being presented, as I, again, go back to the 4 references, as I identify the situation accurately together with my teammates, the collective thought from this pass to say, I can no longer advance the ball safely without losing possession. I'm going to play you because you have identified this situation with me and you provided the angle of support that allows me to either advance possession or continue possession, so we don't lose this transitional moment and then allow for a counterattack. As we have eyes to identify the situation collectively, my pass will then most likely carry on with it a thought that allows you, the recipient of that pass, to continue in the advantageous way of us creating that together. So that I'm going to play your back foot or your front foot, or I'm going to play it into your space for you to take because your supporting angle is great. The pressure off of you is further away. So now I can lead you into the space that I don't even have to allow you to take a touch. I'm going to play you into the space, and you realize that you're oriented in a way to see that space. You don't have to blindly turn into an opponent. You're already facing that space. So as I lead you, we've eliminated that pressuring player on me. I've taken the ball and the advantage that I've had on the ball, and I've given you now that moment to carry and advance the game into that space for you to enjoy and to have fun with. And now that whole situation is repeated later, whether it be a half a second or a second or 2 seconds. Pressure builds around the ball. We have support. We have our relationships, and now we need to identify what is appropriate in our actions in that area of space. Now, again, those area spaces are going to be unique to the game model and idea, depending on how you want to build up, how do you want to continue possession, how do you want to create that final moment behind that last line. That will be nuanced. But as the ball is carried throughout the field in those situations, we should have an informed idea.
Well, I think it's superb. And again, it's one of those lines, when you say it seems obvious, but when you watch teams play, whatever team that may be, like I said, whether it's a foundation under 8, under 9 team, whether it's a professional team, when you watch the team play, you really get, with that concept in your head, you can see the language, and you can see those that are on the same place and understand themselves, and the fluidity in how they pass, where they move, their intuitiveness between the players, the collective kind of shared decision making. It's never perfect. There can always be the misword or the misunderstanding here and there, but generally speaking, you can see the way it works. And what I thought was fascinating, Grant, it's not like you have to play one way to have a language. It doesn't matter if you're a possession-based team, if you're a counter-attacking team or a long ball team, it doesn't matter. The point is, if your team is speaking the same language, it's going to be more effective. It was a wonderful concept. From your opinion, are there teams that you say, actually, as examples, are ones you could say, there you go, that team's got the language going down, you can see they're on the same page and it works?
Yeah, so within or outside of positional play, I think you can say Bayern Munich, I think you can say Liverpool, PSG. I think there's definitely Bielsa with Leeds. I think there's a strong tactical culture that comes from a shared language of an idea that needs to be executed on game day. So yeah, but that definitely doesn't always have. The key idea, I think, what we're saying here is to build a tactical culture. Language kind of comes to precede that fruition, that we need to be able to speak language to create culture. With language, embedded in language are the ideas that hopefully we can architect in such a way within our team that builds that builds something that we can all be proud of on the weekend.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for that. I mean, like I said, we couldn't do the book justice by going through everything, and you've got to read. There's so much more. I've kind of also picked up the topics that kind of relate to one area, and you cover so much more in the book. For people listening, can you tell us just what the book's called, where we can get it? I've got my copy. But
yeah, so the book is called Alchemy Coaching, Turning Training into Gold. Talking about rondos and positional play. It's been a topic that's been discussed more or less over the past decade, but like we've been talking about in the very beginning, it's been very difficult to find just one area or one place where all these ideas are kind of connected, and hopefully in a helpful way. So that's what we try to do in the book, and you can look at and find the book either on Amazon, look it up, or our website, KingKnightCoachEducation.com, and you'll be able to find it there as well.
I'll put the show note in the show notes. I'll put the links to the website and the Amazon link if I can get it as well, so people can find it in the show notes if they want to have a hunt around. And I'd highly recommend it as either if you can get it in time for Christmas, a Christmas present, or certainly if you've got some little bit of cash over Christmas, then maybe something to eat for the new year, because it's definitely worth the read. A couple more questions, if that's the case, around that. So really, I'm interested to know, as a coach who tries to put some of these stuff into practice, I've certainly got better at using rondos and positional play. Bear in mind, I work with, generally speaking, with younger players. So in some ways, it's a bit easier because I can take the concepts and try and make them a bit more simple. But what are some of maybe the frequent mistakes you may have heard or seen yourself when coaches try and use rondos or positional play as part of their training practices?
Yeah, so I think we alluded to it or addressed it a little bit earlier in the show, is it goes far beyond technical execution, or it's an exercise to develop technique. There's a whole, probably another podcast, what is technique, skill acquisition, ideas to develop those things. But for us, the run technique or the pass is in the context of a decision-making moment within the open, chaotic environment, and that's reflective of a situation that would be occurring within a game. And so rondos would be tools to teach these concepts. And for us, one of the things that we have seen is the rondos aren't really teaching any concepts. It's just technical execution, how to receive, how to play that ball. And the question that I would have is, why do you want to play that ball? Why do you want to receive that way? What's the intention that you're trying to promote? And as we get deeper into the why, I think that will that will unearth some of the potential of the rondo, rather than go and have a keep away 5v2. Somehow I've read somewhere or heard somewhere that that's good for you. And I think that's not doing justice to the exercise. And within positional play, it goes far beyond just possession. We talk in depth about intentional possession and how that is really the essence of control, and that doesn't matter if you can keep the ball for 1,000 passes. If you can in 3 passes create that goal scoring moment, great. But it's understanding and executing on these concepts that are so important and embedded within positional play that come out within these spaces and situations that are reoccurring. And so understanding this kind of bridge between concepts that are being taught within rondos, and then it's the link and relationship to intentional possession rather than just for possession.
Is there a trade-off if you adopt an approach where you embrace rondos and positional play, that you sacrifice individual player ball manipulation?
Yeah, so I think that's a fantastic question. I think that is a very honest question, and one I've had myself. And I don't think it necessarily has to be. I think it is an we're reaching too far to say positional play is only regarding passing. I don't think that would be appropriate, because if we found the free man who has time and space, we want to promote that player to take that space. And in this case, the ball is on his foot. And if he doesn't have a player in a better positioned area with more time and space that can cause more disorganization within the opponent's defensive structure, he should take that ball and advance it. He should go learn how to take space on the dribble. And so that definitely needs to be undergirded and supported within the training. And it's not only about passing and moving and supporting, but definitely creating situations of learning knowing how and when and where we can take the ball and advance it on the dribble with an intentional controlled touch to break a line, or even within positional play, you have qualitative advantages. So now if you promote within a passing scheme and overload and isolate, and so now you've created an overload in one area, through support and good balance, you've then created the moment to play back internally and then maybe to play back out wide. You have that qualitative advantage of 1v1 that should be promoted within your positional play understanding. And so I think having a balance or a bit more comprehensive understanding within positional play, rather than just highlighting we pass and we receive and it's all about rondos. No, I would say that would be the fullest expression, and we have to understand and express and allow space for qualitative advantages as well, and the place that control and dribbling do have within positional play. Absolutely.
And I wondered then, do you have a favorite sessional practice? I fully recognize that trying to describe practice on a podcast is almost impossible, especially complicated ones. But is there like anything you would say this is the kind of go-to one, how I use a rondo or a positional play game?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that, and I don't know. I think it all depends on what you're trying to promote. For me, the joy that I have in training, one of the biggest joys is seeing collective ball mastery within the team, that they're able to consistently maintain possession while disorganizing the opponent's pressure. So when we have 7v7, 6v6, or some type of bigger sided game, that's with like 3 goals or channels that we're trying to break into, or targets to play into. I just love seeing that circulation of possession. So whether that's in a 4v2 rondo into a bigger sided positional play game to a type of training game, I just love seeing players move off the ball, maintain possession, and then purposefully try to create the conditions to penetrate into and disorganize the opponent. That gets me excited. I think there's some players and coaches that really like to see that individual flair. There's something to me that I really enjoy, that collective understanding to say, we are understanding and speaking the same language in this moment, and it's beautiful to watch. It is just this orchestra, and everyone's doing their part to make that song sound beautiful, and it's just great. It hums and brings a smile to my face.
Yeah, it's like watching a play or an orchestra playing, isn't it? When it all kind of just clicks in, it works. Especially in training, when you can manipulate a little bit to make it run a little bit more smoother. But yeah, I can see that. Do you have any challenges sometimes getting the defenders to apply themselves fully, or is that down to making it a competitive game, kind of, or having some kind of constraints there that engage the defenders as well?
That's going back on maybe a misapplication of rondos and positional play games. Is then how do you then teach some of these defensive principles and concepts? And that's something that we just couldn't fit within the book. We really wanted to focus on the attacking phase and consolidate in one place this deeper understanding of how these kind of can coalesce, these ideas can coalesce into dominance within the attacking phase of positional play. But most definitely, there are transitional moments. There are defensive sides of the ball and situations that we need to learn how to manage. Again, managing the space, but now without the ball. But taken together, seeing the game as a whole and not isolating those moments, but seeing how one flows into the next, we can then, I think we can attack without the ball. And so how do we defend to manage the space, to rush, to condense space and time and advantages around the ball carrier, to pressure the passes, or to condense around the space, or to protect certain spaces. All that's still part of positional play that I feel has not been discussed enough. So it wouldn't be to the defenders, hey, give it your best today, you're just going to be worked, because there's that numerical advantage. We would then try to constrain and build the situation to say, what is this realistic situation? If we are in fact working defensively, okay, how do we recreate the situations and reinforce the behaviors that identify with these positional play concepts defensively? But on that offensive side, to promote some type of reward and make it worthwhile. But being with a higher end, or the older players, definitely, I think there's more of a motivation or competitive side that we don't have to ask much. We have a great group of guys that whether you have the ball or you don't have the ball, there's this hunger to go get it, and if you have it, to keep it. And that's always been. We haven't really had to pull and pry too much to get that out of them.
I guess that's about setting the right culture, the right environment. That when you come to training, you're going to put the effort in, be professional, and things you said at the beginning about having that right environment in place first, and then all these things work better, don't they? So, my final question, if that's okay, we ask all our guests. Hasn't got to be anything to do with Rondos or Positional Play. It can be, but hasn't got to be. If you could change just one thing about the world of coaching or matches, what would that be?
I think it's to take an honest step back and see the bigger picture. And I think it's to question assumptions as to what is your game model? Okay, do you have one? Why or why not? How does that even apply? And how can that be done well? And what are some dangers in its application? To what is your player development model? Do you have one? Why or why not? What are your assumptions in that? To your training methodology, why do you promote or do or don't do certain exercises, and why not? And so to bring an awareness of your assumptions that you bring with experience and just maybe a lack of reflection to the training pitch, that you might be intentionally or unintentionally harming or delaying the development of the player. So if we say at the end of the day, it's about promoting the well-being of the player and to produce hopefully healthy, robust individuals that can have a place within society, as very few move on to the professional ranks. It'd be great if we can have our hand in that, but if they do, probably it was there were a lot more other variables than just you as a coach. You can't say that was me and my sole doing. It was part of the bigger picture of what is their family life, what is their nutrition, what is their school life, friend group, the environment that they're training, what they're going home to. There's so many things to be considering. And so as a coach, to step back, open your eyes to say, why am I training the way I'm training? Why do I coach the way I coach? This is the environment I'm building, and why am I building that? And try to bring to an awareness of some of the assumptions that you're bringing. And hopefully when you go through those trenches, you can land the plane in a way that you can be confident in and say, some people may disagree, but I've read as much as I can. I've talked to as many people as I can, and this is where I've landed the plane, and I'm going to allow time test it and see how we can do it. And if there's a better way, I'm all ears to do it better.
That's brilliant. Right. That constantly kind of asking yourself why you're doing what you're doing and can you do it better? I mean, they're fundamentals, aren't they? For really not your own development, but certainly to make sure that your players are getting the best possible opportunities in your time, kind of thing, to maximize their potential. Yeah. Thank you so much. That has been awesome. I'm so grateful for your time. The book is brilliant. It certainly is something that I have already embraced and continue to embrace and pick things out of. There's too much in it to kind of, it's going to be, I'm going to have to spend months getting myself on some of these concepts and getting them to practice, but that's what it's all about. So thanks so much for putting it together with Paddy as well. Well, what are your plans moving forward? There's already got to be a version 2 now around defence for the Alchemy Coaching. We've got that sorted out, but what are your plans moving forward for the next maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
Yeah. Well, we were really excited to get the book out, and it's been up to this point well received. And we understood just we're not able to go as deep as we would like to in 250 pages. Absolutely not. And so we are currently building expanded modules that would kind of flesh out some of the content that we weren't able to go into greater detail in. And so right now we're working on an expanded version of positional play games, rondos, the execution and application of some of those concepts. Like you said, you can read about it, we can talk about it, but there are questions of how do we apply this in this context or in that age group. And so we want to provide that resource. That's something we're currently working on, and along with other modules. So we really want to provide an avenue of coaching education that hopefully fills a void or can add value to a coach. As like all of us, we understand that we don't have all the answers, and we want to find opportunities and connect and have conversations to people and resources that will add value. And so we're hopefully, we hope and aim to be a voice in that conversation where we can build resources and experiences and conversations where coaches are getting better and we can add value to the overall coaching education craft.
As coaches, we can just if we can just pick tools that we can help add to our toolbox, that's what you need, right? To constantly evolve yourself. And again, you said at the beginning about, it is a constantly evolving craft. You can't just stand still because the sport moves on, organically, and so it should. That's what keeps it fun, right? So when you get tools like this that come out, you have to grab them and use them, and then hopefully evolve as they evolve as well. So thank you so much for putting it together. I'm sure people might want to reach out and find out more about you yourself, or with these modules, or when the book's out and things like that. The second book, hopefully at some point. What's the best way of reaching out to you, Grant?
Yeah, you can email us or go on our website and contact us at King Patty, coacheducation.com. So you can reach out to us there. You can reach out to me via my email at my university at Grant Knight, GrantKnight at cedarville.edu, CEDARVILLE. And we're happy to talk, happy to discuss, and we're here and available.
You've been superb. Well, I reached out to you and you were kind enough to make yourself available at short notice and, over a busy time as well. So thank you so much. We do this because we just want to get good people sharing what they're doing out there in the coach communities to hopefully help other coaches develop themselves and support their players. And that's exactly what you've done today. So I'm really grateful, Grant. So much in there already, so much in the book. But your one thing you said about feedback should come from the practice itself is brilliant. I love that. I'll be stealing that one. I think that's excellent. And it's so true that actually, as a player, you should be able to embrace yourself in the training session and get out of that what you need to, good, bad, or indifferent. And actually, the less the coach is dominating that process, the better for the player. And if we can create those practices around using Rondos, positional play, and whatever else is appropriate, then all the better for it, right?
Well, I've really enjoyed this time with you, Scott. Thanks for reaching out, and look forward to another one down the road if possible. And all the best to you. Thanks so much.
I'll be holding you to that, definitely. Well, hopefully maybe that we can talk maybe spring or summertime and be more positive news out there. We're all back out on the grass, maximizing the time out there with the players we've got and talking about these modules or the next book or something, Grant. But for now, thanks so much for your time. Have a wonderful Christmas and New Year. Stay safe out there, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Thank you so much, Scott. You as well.